It says it's working. There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our second webinar of our Human Trafficking Awareness Series. This webinar is going to just briefly go over the correlation between human trafficking and social media. So there's a ton of information out there on this topic. So this webinar is just going to really do just a flyover of some general things that fall within this topic. So before we get started, we are active on social media. You can scan the QR code here on the screen, and that will take you to all of our social media links. You can also visit our website, and there you will be able to have access to all of our links as well. So let's just get started. As we go along, if you guys have any questions, just put it in the comment section there, and we will answer them as we go along. Okay, and so for this webinar, the topic is social media. So we're going to briefly touch on what the Go Beyond the X campaign is. We'll do a very brief definition of human trafficking. We do elaborate more on what human trafficking is in one of our previous webinars, so feel free to go back and watch that or pop your questions in the comments there if you have any in regards to human trafficking in general. And then we'll talk about social media's, how social media is used for trafficking recruitment and how traffickers use social media and specific platforms in their operations. And then we'll talk about how we can use social media for good. Okay, very quickly, Grace and the Go Beyond the X campaign. So if you'll notice the picture there in the corner of the Sullivan family, Grace was founded in 2012 by Dr. John and Angie Sullivan. The mission of Grace is to foster social change through strengthening families and eradicating vulnerabilities of human trafficking and exploitation. The Go Beyond the X campaign was launched under the umbrella of Grace in 2021, and the goal of this campaign is to increase awareness of human trafficking so that together we can stop it before it ever happens. Now, what is human trafficking? This definition varies depending on who you ask, because there are a lot of different ways to look at human trafficking. But just a general definition is that human trafficking is the business of stealing freedom for profit. It involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion in exchange for labor, services, or a commercial sex act. How can social media be used for human trafficking recruitment? The big question of the day. The first thing we're going to look at is relationship recruitment. Trafficking often begins with the trafficker and potential victim building some sort of relationship through social media. It doesn't even necessarily have to start off as a romantic relationship, just some sort of connection. The trafficker or recruiter, as we'll refer to them as throughout the webinar, they may use a fake account to communicate, but according to the reports that I have been reading over the past few weeks and the human trafficking hotline, they show that many recruiters have no issue using their own social media accounts for communication and recruitment. Online recruitment begins with commenting on photos or sending direct messages. Recruiters are using this method to build a rapport and the intimacy needed to entice victims into a false sense of trust. And we're going to talk more about that sense of trust in a few slides, but it's pivotal in a recruiter's operations to build that trust with their potential victim. The next phase of recruitment is often referred to as boyfriending, and this phase includes manipulations, feigned romantic interest, flattery, promises or gifts, financial assistance. And they make the victim believe that they are the only ones that care for them. That's part of isolation, which we'll also touch on briefly here in a little bit. Now, let's talk about geography. Recruitment can be done long distance or locally. Once the initial grooming, and grooming is another word that we'll talk more about here in a minute. Once the initial grooming has taken place, recruiters will generally purchase travel tickets or work out some sort of way to meet the victim face to face. Some recruiters do factor in geography into the equation before grooming ever begins. Certain social media apps or dating apps allow for location sharing. Snapchat allows for location sharing, I know. And this allows recruiters to focus on specific geographical locations. So if I'm a recruiter and I want to focus on the Augusta, Georgia area, it would be very easy for me to do that with location sharing. The second thing we're going to talk about is fake or deceptive job recruitment. And traffickers will recruit victims through illegitimate job offers. Offers are often facilitated through fake business profiles, event pages on Facebook. Craigslist is a big one. Recruiters will also contact potential victims directly. They may claim to be a recruiter for a modeling agency or any other kind of actual legitimate business. And just like in relationship recruitment, these interactions include some sort of trust building. And a trustful relationship online is typically made before an actual offer is made by the recruiter. A few red flags to look out for. And one of these do not necessarily mean that something should be considered trafficking. These are just some things that raise some concerns. And of course, more than one of them together would definitely cause a need for concern. Inflated earning potential. Extreme promises regarding immigration benefits, same-day pay, no need for experience or training, housing and transportation costs are provided, and vague and elusive conditions regarding job details. So if they're withholding job details until after, a deal has been made. All right, labor trafficking. Big topic. Labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of excuse me. For the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. In labor trafficking, in-person recruitment is the most common, but recruiters rely heavily on social media platforms to expand their base. Some have established business pages on Facebook or communicate as a business through individual profiles. And it's common for crews to have individual members recruit new members directly from their personal friends or followers list. It's also common for crew members to post brazen photos or videos that involve displays of cash and exaggerated claims about job conditions. And Craigslist is frequently referenced in reports to the National Human Trafficking Hotline as a potential victim's first introduction to a fraudulent job. "26% of participants in a survivor survey by Polaris stated that their trafficker exploited them via their own, meaning the trafficker's own, personal social media accounts rather than creating a fake account. And the sale of sexual services via Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms is less blatant than traditional advertising sites like Craigslist or Backpage. And these are just a couple of examples that I was able to come across in my research. And both of these actually came from a report done by Polaris. And this first picture that shows the image of all the cash was taken, well, they both were taken from Facebook. But this first image was taken, and it was a public post of a potential door-to-door sales company. And then the second post was also taken from Facebook. And you can see the comments here, just that the interest in something like this. There's one comment in there that looks like they've had some experience with this person. They say, what a joke. They don't pay for food or lodging. They take it out of your pay. And then the initial poster pops back with a comment. So it's very interesting just to see how people respond in the comments. Okay, we talked a little bit about grooming a few minutes ago. And traffickers use a grooming method to seek out and recruit potential victims. The steps of grooming include gaining the victim's trust, fulfilling a need. Basically, they find a weakness and they exploit it. And isolation, and then maintaining control. So how does a trafficker gain a potential victim's trust? Attempts at gaining trust may involve asking personal questions, getting to know their victim's needs, sharing personal information about themselves to kind of build a feigned mutual trust situation, making promises, and giving compliments. Once trust is gained, the trafficker will use that information that they have, whether it be fears, desires, insecurities, what have you, to form a connection with the victim. And traffickers often try to make their victims believe that they are the only ones who can meet their needs. And this graphic I found very interesting, and it is pulled from the University of Toledo's website. They actually did a similar report on the correlation between human trafficking and social media. And it's just a few examples of what a potential victim might say and how the trafficker may respond. So I'm going to leave that up just for a second and just let you guys just skim through that. It's very interesting and quite terrifying to see how a simple comment like, my life sucks, which is the fourth row down, and how a trafficker's response that just says, I can make your life better, can lead to that trust building and, making the potential victim feel like the person they're talking to actually does have their best interests in heart, when in reality, that's not the case. All right, social media platforms and how they're used. So this graphic was from the Polaris report, and it breaks down the particular social media platforms and then what types of trafficking have come out of communication from those. And as you can see, Facebook lights up. Almost every block of Facebook is covered there. And so it's just something to be aware of when we're using those platforms and when our kids are using those platforms, because we're going to use them. They are here. They are part of just about everyone's life. They're not going away anytime soon, I don't think. And so traffickers know that. They are going to use that. So these are just some things to know in the back of your head, that Facebook and Instagram, chat apps, Snapchat, dating sites, even YouTube. I would not have thought YouTube, honestly, before I started doing this research. It just didn't click with me that that would be a targeted area. All right, this next graphic is one that we have shared a couple of times on our social media pages and through our emails and newsletters. And it talks about the increase in online recruitment since the pandemic. And as we see here, online recruitment increased by 22% in 2020. But Facebook and Instagram recruitment increased by 120%. So there was a 125% increase in reports to the human trafficking hotline through Facebook and 95% through Instagram. I'll leave that up just for a second so you guys can browse that. Those are outstanding numbers. The first time I read them, I was really baffled, because that's a really big number. But I mean, you think about the pandemic, everything shut down. So potential trafficking hotbeds, we'll say, bars and strip clubs, places like that, they were closed down. So traffickers went where the people went, which was online. And so there was a huge spike in reported instances through the human trafficking hotline from 2020 and on. I am curious to see, now that we are post-pandemic, and at least down here, I'm not sure how it is in the rest of the country, but down here, everything is back to normal just about. I am curious to see in the next year or so how those numbers change. So that'll be something interesting to just look into and follow up with. All right. What can you do? What can we do? Be a voice. Super easy. Speak up. Talk to your kids if you have kids or grandkids, or have anybody who you have an influence over. Talk to them. Let them know how to be safe. Be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. Be an advocate. Use your voice to advocate for others. We all have a platform, whether it's social media, public speaking, a close circle of friends, whatever our platform is, it's there to be used. Spread awareness. I always say we can't fix a problem if we don't know about a problem. And I am a firm believer that prevention starts with awareness. We don't know to fix the problem if we're not told about the problem. And be the change. Just do something. Partner with like-minded individuals or organizations to implement change. Grace has a ton of ways to get involved. And I mean, you can get involved by just sharing our post or encouraging someone to reach out to the human trafficking hotline if they're suspected, if there's a suspected human trafficking situation. All right, what's next? I told you guys this was going to be short. It was like a 20-minute overview of social media and human trafficking. Our next webinar, I've already got scheduled for August 30th. I'm not going to do one in July. We'll kick back off at the end of August, and at 7 p.m., it's on a Tuesday, again, at 7 p.m. on August 30th, we'll talk about labor trafficking. There is a ton of information about labor trafficking. I have all intention of making that webinar more than 20 minutes because there are just so many things that we can talk about in that webinar. So let's see here. Are there any questions that we need to discuss or answer before we wrap this up? Slide 33. Let's look at that one. Yes, I really liked that graphic. I actually came across that graphic because it was used, I was doing some research. It was used in a PhD candidate's dissertation. And so I checked her reference page and found the initial post that was done from the University of Toledo in a research paper that they had conducted there. So very interesting and very practical. I mean, those are things that when I was reading them, I was like, oh my gosh, like I've literally said things before, like to my husband even, like, you don't get me. I mean, like, how natural is that to say, you don't understand me? Or, you know, my life sucks. Or, you know, a teenager saying my parents don't trust me, or why are they still treating me like a kid? Those are all things that probably most teenagers would say at some point. Is there any data relative to LinkedIn and trafficking? I do not recall seeing LinkedIn, and there may be. That is a very good question, and I will have to do a little digging into that, but I do not recall, and I'm just browsing through my paperwork here. I do not recall LinkedIn popping up, at least in the reports that I have read. That's not to say it's not there. But I will have to look into that because that's a very good question. Any other questions or comments? Alrighty. If not, thank you guys so much for listening in. I did record this webinar, so it will be posted to our YouTube channel hopefully sometime tomorrow. And then I will be sending out a link to everybody so that it can be watched and listened to at everyone's leisure. And I'm just going to go back to this last page that has the QR code and the link for the next webinar, as well as our social media handles, my email address if there's any questions, and our website. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for a little bit. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your day.